I'm back with another hard truth. Favoritism. We've all experienced it, and it really makes us wonder, do I belong? Or do I belong out in the hallway in a folding chair, or maybe even farther away? It has us questioning whether we can trust and our sense of belonging and belief in the organization and the leaders that we want to support. But here's the good news, bad news. Most of what we see labeled as favoritism really isn't favoritism at all. It's a broken system. So I'd like to share a little bit more about what I mean. So favoritism at its core is uncertain. It's often these ambiguous events. We're passed over for something. We don't receive the schedule that we wanted or the holiday off that we requested. We maybe can't participate in a certain training or are given tasks that we think we voiced we didn't want, or we wanted to try something different with our work. And it's all of these micro events, small moments that lead us to start to think, hey, maybe I don't belong here, or I'm not the preferred person. I don't represent the culture or the team, and I'm not being chosen because of something that's not job related, not related to my performance, to the value that I bring. And even when favoritism is just perceived, it starts to drain and spread throughout the organization. So why is that? When I naturally feel that I don't belong, I might start to talk to others, share my experience, get their opinion. Then I start to get other people maybe thinking, oh, Jennifer's not being chosen for this for no good reason. They're playing favorites with whatever they're doing. And so we get into a bit of a doom spiral. Starts with people talking and then starts to spread and affect even more and more outcomes as we ask, am I the only one? And do I belong? Starts to hurt the culture and chips away at really everyone's belief that they're part of something that's fair, that's equal, that the culture is strong. What do we truly believe in? So here's the good news. Most of what employees call favoritism isn't intentional. It's not written in some bias or some non-job related preference for someone over someone else. The bad news is that we have broken systems, and our way of educating and training and supporting our teams isn't where it needs to be. So if we look at just perceptions, whether from our own surveys or elsewhere, we often find a huge gap when employees are asked simple questions of whether they feel confident they know what's expected. So a large scale of a few thousand employees found that over half of them don't feel confident they know what they're expected to do or what defines good performance on a day-to-day basis. More than half of employees feel that performance systems are unfair or unclear or just need to be better. And then we know the majority of the workforce isn't receiving the amount of feedback that they need to be successful. So if we look at maybe one scenario of how that can happen, maybe we have two people, and if we imagine that they're equal contributors in every way, because this is a hypothetical, and one maybe started at a time when manager wasn't so busy. They received extra training, maybe because the whole team wasn't busy. They received a lot of extra support, were totally brought on board with operating procedures, with how to perform, how to handle customers, all the good things. And then someone else was maybe hired during a busy season or at a difficult period of time where there was a lot of change in the organization. So they didn't receive that support. So they don't know as much, but they've picked it up and they're starting to move forward as much as they can. Then one is left to not know so much of what the expectations are, if it's shift work, how we do the schedule, how we progress within the organization throughout our tenure. And so because they don't know how decisions are made, even though they've managed to figure it out and they're performing at the same level, they're just like, okay, I don't understand why we're operating in this way, or why I'm being treated or in a certain way and not getting certain things that I've asked for, or they don't have the full picture of what's happening. So because they didn't have some of the benefits and a fuller onboarding process or an understanding, then they didn't understand the decision criteria up front. They have to take a giant leap and they're going to fill in what's happening to them with maybe an understanding of, well, I'm not the favorite. So when is it true favoritism? When we're looking at that, we might be looking at broken systems where there's not education and training for leaders on how to make evidence-based decisions. We have a clear, after my example of the two employees that were hired at the same time. So our two hypothetically equally contributing employees really show the importance of everyone understanding what performance is, how we operate, what our core beliefs are, the culture, that whole piece. And not just, in onboarding, but this is going to happen on an ongoing basis. What if we have we're implementing a new software program or a new way of working, and someone's not around as much, or someone happens to just be present a little bit more or overhear a conversation? We can start to have, again, these little ripples where someone has more access to information and understands what's going on, more than others. So it really emphasizes the importance of having clear goals and objectives and making sure everyone understands them, how we operate, how we define fairness, how outcomes and anything involving what employees are there to receive, their rewards, their recognition, how we manage that. And even understanding the competencies, how we define performance, what performance looks like, so that people know how to grow and advance. If we don't define performance and decision criteria up front, we're really counting on employees to make a giant leap and overcome this huge gap of understanding on their own. And when they do that, they may naturally come to certain conclusions that aren't entirely accurate. Or to use, if we're talking about the frontline workforce or shift work, we might have cases where schedules are being made and someone's doing it really quickly because they feel overwhelmed, and it's not done in a way that supports fairness or that clear understanding of how we make the schedule. Maybe leaders need more training in explaining the why, having difficult conversations. If I avoid having those difficult conversations, then my team's not going to perform. And from that, we're going to struggle with performance, and they're not going to get the rewards that they're expecting because I didn't have that difficult conversation for them in the first place. And lastly, I'm going to say it here again, the importance of hiring assessments, promotion assessments, and even performance reviews and feedback when we have those formal systems for sharing what performance is, where I'm doing, where leader and team are coming together to understand how we're doing, whether that's at a macro level on results or on a person-to-person behavior team level. Then we're going to start to have those meaningful conversations and come to shared understanding of how we're doing, how we're working, and why we're getting certain outcomes and why we're not. So targeted coaching, leadership development, all of those things can do a tremendous good for making sure we have not only better systems, but shared decision making. So you're here, you probably already know the consequences of lower engagement, lack of innovation, degrading culture, yada, yada, right? But what are the consequences maybe legally and some of the risks of these broken systems and favoritism in the workplace? Well, there was a Supreme Court case from 2024 that really makes this point clearly. A sergeant in law enforcement from the city of St. Louis, Muldrow, she worked in intelligence, and she was moved to patrol for reasons that she thought were rooted in favoritism. She kept her title, she kept the same pay and rank, all the good things. However, it was a job that she didn't want. It was an assignment she didn't feel needed to be made, and there wasn't a clear reason to her business necessity why she was moved from intelligence to patrol. Well, the Supreme Court was happy to clarify that and shared that any meaningful harm, in her case, the switch in work tasks, can be challenged even without it being a classic demotion. So just because she kept the same compensation, the same title, that change, because it couldn't be rooted in any kind of business necessity, that it was ruled as discrimination. So even when nothing on paper looks obviously unfair, the experience can tell a different story and have consequences for the organization, whether that's legally or even with our reputation in the community or professional field. Allegations clearly can damage reputation and even our results and our bottom line. So now our goal is always to give you a realistic call to action, something to think about, something that's really simple, actionable to do that you can take from what we're sharing. So if you were to take just 30 seconds to think about the people you influence, the people that rely on you, whether you're formally a leader or working within a team, what's just a simple change that you could make to increase perceptions of fairness and make decisions easier, or make decisions more rooted within the team so they understand it and they feel that they have a voice? What might happen if you made that change? And what might happen if you don't? Lastly, we're going to include a little assessment here that can help you uncover some of your blind spots as a leader, maybe some strengths that are doing good that you want to augment and apply even more as a leader, or as just a strong individual contributor on your team, and maybe some things that you want to change. And lastly, if you want to talk about fairness, favoritism, employee engagement, turnover, or any of those key topics on the path to driving results for your team this year, we'd love to play a part. So until next time, that was today's hard truth.